Welcome to Retro Toy Princess. I'm Allison Troy. In 1983, Transformers and GoBots both hit shelves in the United States. However, nobody in our household cared. Both my brother and I were still wrapped up in Star Wars, experiencing its Return of the Jedi Renaissance, and it was the first big year of Masters of the Universe. 1983 was, after all, the year of the second half of Wave 1 becoming available in our area. Hello, Tila. And later in the year, Wave 2 and Eva Lynn really rocked my world. Plus, Strawberry Shortcake and her friends had gone international, and the Berry Happy Home had arrived. Plus, Care Bears were hitting store shelves. 1983 was a big year, so there was no room for transforming robots, to be honest. By 1984, superpowers had arrived, and that was consuming my time. I had also discovered the Baroness on store shelves when my brother was looking for G.I. Joe figures, and Masters of the Universe got even bigger in 1984. While Transformers had started to seep down into our lives, I was not interested. Where were the girl robots? And while my brother was probably interested, the cartoon hadn't hit airwaves in our area. We had just gotten Filmation's Masters of the Universe cartoon. Also, Transformers were expensive and big. While my dad was making much more money at this point, he wasn't making Transformers every week kind of money. He was making we got $5 a week or less for toys each week kind of money. I mean, to be fair, 2 kids, that was $10 a week. And this was at a time where my mom could feed 2 kids, herself, and my dad on a weekly grocery budget of $35, with us only having to resort to Hamburger Helper around the end of the month when the rent and the electricity and the phone were all due. My brother did start picking up GoBots around this time. I was mostly unimpressed, especially as we moved closer toward 1985 and I was getting closer to middle school age. I had also started reading Stephen King the summer before, and was now allowed to watch some scary movies. So a little bit of my weekly allowance was starting to go toward getting paperback horror novels, VHS movie rentals, and way more was going toward 45 RPM records and cassette tapes, plus comic books. With superpowers had come comic books, so GoBots, I just wasn't interested. My budget wouldn't allow it. My brother pretty quickly acquired a huge stack of GoBots. He'd get those on weeks that he couldn't find a Star Wars figure that he wanted. This was happening more and more honestly as he was starting to lose interest in Star Wars. Also, we were both getting Masters of the Universe, so we were completing the new waves pretty quickly between us. And while he'd gotten into Marvel Secret Wars figures, there weren't as many of those coming out. He had all of them. Honestly, though, it was probably a really good sign and really normal that our interests were starting to diverge more. Plus, as previously mentioned, fewer and fewer toys were appealing to me as I got older. One of the reasons he was able to get so many GoBots so quickly was they were like $2.50 each, which meant for his $5 of allowance for toys each week, he could get 2. I watched him acquire these robots that turned into cars and other stuff more and more disinterestedly. And when he started watching the GoBots cartoon, I was even more bored. Or at least I was until the day I was watching it with him, unable to focus on Stephen King's different seasons. That story about Shawshank Prison was awfully boring for an 11-year-old. 2 characters on the TV screen caught my attention. The episode featured Crasher, a femme fatale race car who still to this day is one of my all-time favorite 1980s villainesses, and a heroic GoBot who turned into a spaceship. Her name was Pathfinder. I was even more taken by her. So, of course, the next time we went to town, I was on a mission to find Pathfinder. That week, we started our shopping trip at Montgomery Ward's. They had a huge wall of GoBots, but I couldn't find either Crasher or Pathfinder. I definitely wanted both, but I wanted Pathfinder the most. We then passed KB Toy Store. I was grateful they didn't have her there. Their new toys were hella expensive. They're famous for their dump bins and markdown clearance toys, but if you had to buy something brand new there, prepare to spend your entire allowance on one figure you could get anywhere else for $2.50. Our next stop was JCPenney's toy department. No Pathfinder or Crasher there, although I was tempted to get a Mego Daisy Duke 3 3/4 action figure with her Jeep in a set. It was marked down to $4.99. Regularly, it was like $10, and I'd wanted that set for a long time. But I didn't want it more than I wanted Pathfinder. Besides, it was spring 1985, and the Dukes of Hazzard were so old and boring at that point. We went to Cellmart, Walmart, 2 different local discount department stores, still no Pathfinder. While my mom was grocery shopping, I went down to the end of the strip mall the grocery store was in to the service merchandise to see if they had Pathfinder, as this would be my last chance until next week. They did not have her, and they didn't have Crasher either. But I still wanted a GoBot, even if it wasn't one of the 2 I wanted the most. So I settled for Smallfoot. She wasn't Pathfinder, but she was one of the girl characters, and she was also one of the characters on my list. That was way better than going home empty-handed. And service merchandise had the GoBots on sale for $2.25, which definitely meant I could grab another GoBot. I settled for Scooter. He was one of the main GoBots, and my brother didn't have him yet. I did have fun with these 2 GoBots on the way home. They both had relatively easy transformations, and I was able to come up with a couple different adventures for the nearly hour drive back to our house. It just wasn't as much fun as it could have been. I wanted Pathfinder and Crasher. The next week, I spent a lot of time making up adventures that explained why Pathfinder and Crasher were gone. They'd been teleported to a different dimension on the other side of the galaxy, and it would take them a long time to get back. The next week, I was ready for the hunt, but again, all of the stores yielded no Pathfinder, and again, I went home with other GoBots. The silver lining for me was that at least not finding Pathfinder or Crasher meant that service merchandise was the last stop, and they still had them for $2.25 each. That was 25 cents cheaper than even Walmart. Weeks went by and I acquired more GoBots, but still not the 2 I wanted. I was beginning to think I would never get Pathfinder or Crasher. Then finally, the day came where I found Pathfinder at the store. She was as cool as I wanted her to be. It was just after my birthday in April 1985, which was good because I ended up having to buy her at KB Toy Store, and that extra bit of birthday money helped me afford the $3.99 price tag at KB Toys. And Crasher didn't show up until December that year at Service Merchandise as her Christmas stock began to show up. Service merchandise had quickly become the destination for finding GoBots. My GoBot want list was down to Spacey, and I had begun to think I would never find her, but lo and behold, on a trip to Central Texas to spend Christmas at my grandparents', we stopped in Austin at a Service Merchandise so my mom could look for a few last-minute gifts. And there in a dump bin, I found Spacey. Sometime in March 1986, right when spring arrived and all the doors and windows were wide open on our house to air it out after a long, stuffy winter, I set Pathfinder down, mid-adventure, on the china cabinet in the kitchen so I could go to the bathroom. I leaned her against the big ceramic pumpkin where my mom kept all the seasoning packets, as well as small plastic containers of seasoning and ketchup packs and the Taco Bell sauce packs. I managed to get distracted watching television on my way back to the kitchen. It was an afternoon showing of He-Man and She-Ra. Neither episode was one I'd seen. When I went back to the china cabinet to get Pathfinder, she was gone. I spent a lot of time looking for her, and I never found her. It was like she disappeared into thin air. She wasn't anywhere on the china cabinet. She wasn't under the china cabinet. At the time, we didn't have a cat or a dog, so there was no way for a pet to have stolen it. I was alone in the house. My parents and brother were outside barbecuing and sitting in the yard enjoying the nice day. No one had come in, unless perhaps in the 5 or 10 minutes I was in the bathroom. But for that to have happened, someone would have had to come inside our house, went right to Pathfinder, grabbed her, and then left before I came out into the living room, which was the only room with access into the kitchen where the china cabinet was. I was upset. I was in tears. It had taken forever to find her. When my parents and brother came back inside, they helped me look, but she was still nowhere to be found. She'd just disappeared, as if she'd never been. My mom promised me that she would buy me a new one the next time we went to town, apparently having forgotten the ordeal that finding the first one had been. I tried not to whine about that to her, just grateful that she was going to buy me one, and that I could use my allowance that week to buy the Crystal Swift one I'd been saving up for. Besides, I was pretty sure we wouldn't find Pathfinder, and I just knew that if we didn't, by the time I did find her again, my mom would have forgotten this particular offer to buy her for me. My mom would have forgotten this particular offer to buy a replacement for me. We checked all the stores, and while there were plenty of GoBots, there were no Pathfinders. I found my Crystal Swift. I found my Crystal Swiftwind at Walmart, and it was $2 cheaper than I'd expected. Our final stop before groceries was service merchandise. Since we were officially, as a family, looking for a replacement Pathfinder, and my mom was buying, it was prudent we all went, instead of me running down to look for it on my own, and then having to run back and get money from her if they had it, which ran the risk of somebody else buying it in the 5 to 10 minutes it took me to run back and forth. The normal pegs at service merchandise didn't have Pathfinder. In fact, they didn't have any GoBots at all. The pegs they were normally on were empty, and the price stickers on those pegs were gone. I was ready to cry all over again as much as I had the day she disappeared. Then my mom came up with a carded Pathfinder in her hand and said, "Look what I found. I found an entire bin with them in it. And they're all marked down to $1. Go see if there are any in there that you and your brother need, and we'll pick up a few extra." We left with 15 GoBots, and I had my Pathfinder again. That was also the last time we bought any GoBots, as the other GoBots pretty much finished all of my must-have characters, and then ones we just didn't have. Also, by this point, I was completely into She-Ra, Princess of Power. Much cooler than transforming robots. Many years later, when I was helping my mom move the china cabinet, she caught me looking between the drawers. "What are you looking for?" she asked. "Pathfinder, remember how she disappeared all those years ago?" My mom laughed, almost embarrassed. "I thought you figured that out a long time ago," she said. "Figured what out?" "I broke her and threw her away." The look on my face had her quickly explain that she'd come in to get some seasoning salt out of the big ceramic pumpkin. She knocked Pathfinder over, and when Pathfinder hit the floor, she broke. My mom quickly put her in her pocket, thinking she could fix it because she knew I'd be upset, and she'd just give her back to me the next day fixed. But then she couldn't figure out how to fix her. So she threw it out in the trash the next day while I was at school. "I thought you knew," she said. "Why else would I have let you get all those GoBots that weekend if not for me feeling guilty?" And finally, the mystery was solved. I preferred it when I didn't know. It may seem silly over something like a GoBot that cost a couple bucks, but the level of betrayal sat with me for a really long time.